welcome to PhD&D on YouTube. This is another in the world building series. Today a brief word on geographies, cultures, how they interact before the next video, which is city building. Cities and towns, one of my favorite activities of world building actually, but I like to have an idea of the geography and how it has influenced the culture, which will then influence the cities and towns. So I'm going to keep this video a little more brief than the last. The last one was about 17 minutes, a little longer than I want to go with most of them. So let's get started here today. Having a basic knowledge of geography is going to help you in the long run with world building. We are talking about fantasy settings here mostly, and things don't have to go how they go in real life, but be prepared, as I've said before, to maybe not fully explain it scientifically how that happens. Then we get into the whole Star Wars explaining the Force, midichlorians, that whole bunk where, you kind of ruin the fun magic side of it. But just be able to explain yourself why you want something to happen. So, and I'll get into that. Let's explain it here. Two major things with geography: know where your mountains are, and know where your oceans are. That is a big, big part of it, because water is going to represent a lot with life, vegetation, different, how the land is basically set up in different areas, deserts obviously versus woodlands, and so forth. So know those for sure. Then comes in rivers. Rivers flow downhill and are usually going to go from your mountains to your ocean. That's common. That could be a situation where, however, where a certain mountain in your world, the mountain of some certain deity or just some legend or lore, where the rivers flow uphill. And that's fine. That's enough of an explanation right there. That mountain itself, rivers flow uphill. Nowhere else do they. But right there, that's something you've created to kind of take the world, make it a little more fantastic in your own. So just know the rivers typically are going to flow downhill. And rarely do rivers actually split as they're flowing forward. Usually water tends to want to come together, so as it flows downhill, avoid having it split unless that is, playing a major role in that area. So having this general knowledge of the geography of your world is going to help you, like I said, in the long run. But it also goes back to the ripple effect, which we talked about last week. Now we're talking about the geography we want, but maybe if we backtrack to the creators of our world, they're going to influence that geography. Now we're rippling back, rippling forth. What geography do you want? What geography do the creators want? And mesh it together right there. If you had the god of fire and the god of water, and they fought it out, duked it out at the creation of the world, who won? What would that result in? Did the god of water win, where the earth is covered in oceans? Maybe it's a naval campaign where there's just islands everywhere and plenty of life. Or maybe the god of fire won, and it's a desolate, barren wasteland where life rarely occurs. Think about that. If you had two, primordials that formed the earth through the elements, the god or the primordials of fire and lightning are going to create a very different atmosphere, a very different world than those of wind and water. Just keep those things in mind, going back to the creators, coming forward, and keeping it consistent anyways with the stories and the lore you've set forth in this world. Another thing, vegetation is a big one. If you have, you're going to have very fertile lands near water, but then you've got deserts, which you don't want to have a desert with 1,000 rivers and running through it, lakes everywhere, raining all the time. It doesn't make sense. If you want something like that, just be prepared to have a good story behind it, or be able to explain why you want it. Because it's fine to have what you want, but when it's that, out of whack, have a story with it. It just needs a story. That's a perfect point for plot hooks for everything in your world. And that's part of the fun of it, is finding areas where you can change things from reality. So think about that, and then think about how cultures and societies are going to be influenced from this geography. Think about, if you want the classic dwarves of old in your campaign, in your world, then you're going to want mountains somewhere. You don't want a flat land with no mountains at all. If you want elves, traditional classic elves, you're going to want forest. Just think about those things. Think about if you have a lot of forests, are there a lot of elves? How's that going to influence both ways? And again, we have to go back to earlier. We have to go back to the creators, back to the lives, the races we've put on this planet, and how do they interact with the geography? How do they interact to create their societies? Are they a very primitive society? A society in which, they're just roaming around finding food? Are they a society in which they've been beaten so many times by barbarians, they've been raided, dominated everything, that they require a lord, they require somebody to protect them? Think about just where they are in the world, their food sources are going to influence their future societies and cultures, because all these things go together. They're all back and forth, like I said, that ripple effect. It's not just one layer after the other. Everything is influencing all the way through. So, a little bit of rambling there, I apologize. But be thinking about these things because, like I said, in the next video there will be the city building, the town building, and that is where you really want to look at the culture, look at the society, look at the geography of the area. You want to be able to have those things in mind before building the city. I feel that makes a much better city in the end, rather than slapping a city on a blank slate, creating it, and then going out and creating the geography. That's a method, but in this situation, it can be much better and more consistent to have the geography laid out beforehand, the culture laid out somewhat beforehand, so that you can create a very real city that you can bring to life. So today was a quick world building video. Just be thinking on these things. You can write them down, you can draw maps if you want, but more than anything, just have thought about them by this point. A lot of my world building advice to you is maybe you don't have to write everything down that I'm going over. Maybe you don't take a lot of these steps, but think about it. If you've pondered it in your mind, it's going to create a much better world on paper when you finally do it. Just have these topics at least ran through your mind 1 or 2 times. So that is a quick word on geography, a quick word on cultures, their relationship. Be prepared for the city building and town building coming very soon, and thank you for watching PhD&D.